and big tech generally. Good morning, Ambassador O'Brien. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Great to be with you.
First of all, do you work for Elon Musk? I know you consult for a bunch of big companies. Is Tesla one of them or SpaceX?
No, we don't. We don't work for Elon, but Elon, feel free to call us. We'd love to help you.
Well, first of all, tell me, what did you think of a Russian official threatening an American citizen?
Well, this is a very serious issue, especially in light of the fact that Russia has a history of assassinating its opponents, and so the FBI is almost certainly consulted with Elon. There's a duty to warn that the FBI has for American citizens who've been threatened by foreign governments. And unfortunately, it happens more and more with China, Iran, now Russia getting into this game of threatening Americans. So Elon, I'm sure, has great security. He can certainly afford it. But the U.S., because of Elon's role in the Ukraine crisis and the great work that his companies have done, really ought to be thinking about supplementing his security, at least giving them daily intelligence feeds and potentially giving him government security to work with his private folks. I mean, this is a very serious threat.
Very serious threat. And it also underscores that what Elon Musk did was significant. I mean, he may be nominated for a Nobel Prize next year because I think he helped save Ukraine. What do you think of my assessment there?
Well, he should be, because Ukraine is winning the information war in this war. And the reason it's winning is because of the United States of America, and specifically U.S. private sector tech companies. And there are two big reasons, Hugh. First is Musk and Starlink. What he did was unprecedented. As you know, in the early day or two of the war, Russia tried to use its technical capabilities to take Ukraine off the internet and to prevent President Zelensky and the Ukrainians from communicating with the outside world. Elon Musk stepped in an unprecedented fashion for a private company, repositioned Starlink satellites, and then sent within 24 hours of the invasion uplink terminals so that Ukraine and President Zelensky would remain connected to the internet. I don't think there's a similar example of a private sector company outside of a Marvel movie with a character doing that in real life. It's amazing what he did. And
he is the Tony Stark of the private sector, and a Medal of Freedom would be at least a Medal of Freedom, because he really did. That matters. Technology matters so much in this war, correct?
Oh, 100%. Imagine this war if Ukraine was not connected to the outside world via the internet. And the second shout out I'll give, and I've been very critical of U.S. social media companies on your show and others, as you know, Hugh, over the years, but it's U.S. social media platforms that then allowed Zelensky to use that internet link up with Starlink to get the message out, to show the war crimes, the targeting of civilians, the resilience of the Ukrainian people. And it's, the Facebook and Google and Twitter, which Elon may own soon, and all these other social media platforms that got the message out to the whole world. And it did two things. Number one, it galvanized the West and it galvanized Europe. But number two, there were a lot of countries that are either neutral or sympathetic to Putin and Russia that may not have put this information out, but they couldn't avoid it because their people were watching what was happening on social media. So between Elon providing the internet access and the Ukrainians taking advantage of social media platforms that have worldwide reach, Ukraine has won this information war. It's really astounding. So, a lesson here is we need to be careful about what we do with big tech, notwithstanding our legitimate concerns, because breaking up big tech would have left the People's Republic of China and their massive internet companies, TikTok and others, which have been very helpful to the Russians and censored for the Russians. That would have allowed them to control the worldwide global information space. And can you imagine how different Ukraine would look if you were watching the war on TikTok as opposed to American social media platforms?
This is in stark relief, and therefore I wanted to talk about it with you. I am a huge critic of big tech because of the censorship that they have practiced domestically. On the other hand, I've also said, don't run off and bring a Sherman Antitrust Act against. That's a blunt instrument. That is not a regulatory approach to the problems that ail big tech. Number one, the private sector is acting. Elon Musk is itself the private sector working to correct Twitter's errors. But I am curious, do you think that the old antitrust laws ought to be force-fit, square peg and round holes, or vice versa, to address big tech? I think we need new legislation and new rules.
So I agree with you, Hugh, and I wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal back in December, and it got a lot of attention. Breaking up big tech with antitrust tools is a very blunt instrument, And number one, it would be terrible for the information space. But number two, these companies have scale. And the only way we can stay in competition with the Chinese, and the Chinese Communist Party is pumping hundreds of billions of dollars every year into their AI, quantum computing, machine learning, all these technologies of the future. The U.S. still has an edge, and that's why I'm confident that the U.S. is going to prevail in big power competition. But the edge doesn't come from the government. It doesn't come from government research programs or government bureaucracies. The edge comes from these large U.S. private sector companies that have the scale to do the research and the innovation that keep us in the game. And think about SpaceX, another Elon Musk situation. If it wasn't for SpaceX, we'd still be reliant on the Russians to get American astronauts down from the space station during this war. Can you imagine the leverage they'd have on us? We don't have that problem because Elon Musk, cut through the bureaucracy of the big defense contractors and NASA and developed a way to get us to space. Jeff Bezos is doing the same thing, and there are other U.S. companies that are doing it. We've got a renaissance in space because of the private sector. So we've got to be very careful about using the blunt instruments of antitrust with Republican conservatives joining up with Amy Klobuchar and Chuck Schumer to destroy American businesses. We need to regulate those businesses. There's no question about it. The censorship and the bias in big tech against conservatives, has to be fixed. It's a real concern. It's not a fake concern. It's a real concern. But we've got to be careful how we do it so we don't destroy these great national treasures and assets of this country.
Now, I have come to this position after sitting down for dinner a couple of times with Mark Zuckerberg and talking to him on this show. And the dinner with Zuckerberg had not been one-on-one, so I don't want to give that impression. However, among the people that were there, Ross Douthat, the first question as we went around the table, I said, "Are you a patriot?" And Zuckerberg looked at me, stunned. Of course I'm a patriot. And he ran through all the programs he was running with DARPA. Facebook, Meta now, was running with DARPA. And from that point forward, I've begun to think that what we need is a highly specific set of regs to assure content neutrality, but not to cripple. And you say we need scale. Would you explain scale for the Steelers fans out there?
Coming from a Browns fan,
I know scale.
I'm from LA and a Rams fan. I think we got the trophy this year.
But
go look, we have to have companies that can spend billions of dollars a year on esoteric research, on basic research into artificial intelligence and quantum computing and machine learning and all the other areas of tech. Because the U.S. government just doesn't spend the kind of money. We're not a command economy. We spend some of the money through DARPA, but even the money we spend through DARPA gets funneled, and that's an advanced research program of the Pentagon. That money still gets funneled through private sector firms. So without a robust private sector, without a private sector with companies that can literally spend tens and twenties and hundreds of billions of dollars researching these, we're going to get left in the dust by the Chinese. There's no government equivalent to what our private sector companies are doing. So if we break up those companies, we're handing the tech high ground to China, to ByteDance and TikTok and Huawei and all these instrumentalities of the Chinese Communist Party. And guess what? They're going to, if you think shadow banning and some of the activities of Twitter were bad, and they were, can you imagine what it's going to be like when tech is controlled and all your social media platforms are controlled from Beijing and not from Silicon Valley?
Last question. We got about a minute, Ambassador O'Brien. Why is Silicon Valley, you're California, why are they so tone deaf? I mean, Mark is the only guy who has reached out to actually hear, I don't know how much it made it through, but to talk to serious conservatives about these issues. Silicon Valley's in a deep blue bubble. It is tone deaf.
Well, it's in California, and it's a bubble in California, and it's fed by my former university, my law school, Berkeley, and your school, Harvard, and Stanford, and the elites control these places, and so folks come into those companies with a bias already. But I think you're starting to see a revolt even in Silicon Valley. You've got folks like Peter Thiel and Blake Masters, who's running for Senate now in Arizona as a conservative. You've got Elon Musk, who's a libertarian. So I think you're starting to see a diversity of opinion. And I also think with some of these companies, the backlash, whether it's Disney in Florida or the stock prices, I think they're realizing they can't cut out half the country.
Robert C. O'Brien, Ambassador O'Brien, thank you. And